Hi, Manuel.
Hello, Anand.
So today my guest is Manuel Iori. He's a professor at the University of Modena in Reggio Emilia in Italy. It's known as UNIMORE. He works mainly with optimization problems such as packing, routing, scheduling, and so on. He proposed many interesting models and algorithms based on integer programming and heuristics for this class of problems. He has published many papers, has a lot of collaborations, and has a very nice career. So it's my pleasure to have Manuel here. He's a very good friend of mine. And right, Manuel, how are you?
So thanks, Anand, for inviting me. I'm okay. Let's say I'm quite bored. I'm always at home due to COVID. And here we're still in a partial lockdown. But I'm fine. I use this time to stay with family and work. And that's all.
Right. So you were like born and raised in Reggio Emilia, is it right?
Yeah, so the name is not very easy to report in English, Reggio Emilia, but let's say I was born here in the 70s. And I moved from times to times, but eventually I came back to Reggio Emilia. That's where I'm speaking now from. And I lived there for most of my life, let's say. I was born in the countryside, not a very fancy place, let's say, not very, but far away from many things. So I used to be there most of the time with women, let's say, my mother, my grandmother, and my grandmother, especially with my grandmother and grandmother. And I had a dog, and I was going walking around the fields with the dog. That was my childhood, let's say.
Yeah, it looked fun. You like any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have a sister. She's 8 years younger than me,
Oh, okay.
and she followed the steps of my father. So she's working in a bank, and she's living not far from here, like Correggio. Correggio is a city like 20,000 inhabitants, quite close to Reggio Emilia.
Mm-hmm. So like you spent your some of your childhood period in the countryside, and then you eventually moved to Reggio and spent
Yeah,
your teenage
the
years.
place where I come from is called Barco. Barco is a small town, 2,000 inhabitants. And I was not even in Barco. I was a little bit far away from Barco. And so in the countryside.
Okay.
The house used to be a mill. I think it's called mill. So there was a river that the house was using to produce energy. And but then the mill was abandoned, and because my family decided to do other jobs, and I stayed there for all the time, like kindergarten, primary school, secondary school. I only moved when I went to university.
Okay. Oh, all right. And then like you went to the university like for undergrad. So what course did you pick?
Well, I started in the 90s engineering, and at that time the first 2 years of any engineering course were practically the same everywhere. So you could do this first 2 years everywhere. They had something like calculus, physics, chemistry, some basic IT, and stuff like that. So I started in Parma, which is not far away, but it was electronics. So I chose Parma mostly because my friends were going there. We could make a car and we could commute every day with this car. It was a nice period. But then eventually I realized electronics was not really my field. And so after a year, I moved back to Reggio Emilia, where Unibo started a new annex. Let's say it was a secondary school of engineering. And that was, if I'm not wrong, 1993. And it was a nice project. It was one of the first industrial engineering courses in Italy. So I went there and I started this course, and I did it. I stayed there for 3 more years, and then I enjoyed the traveling. I started traveling. The first good period was an Erasmus period that I did in Paris. So I spent an entire academic year there in Paris, and that was a very good period, let's say. And when I came back, I moved from Reggio Emilia. So I had enough living with my parents, and then so I moved to Bologna and I started living in Bologna, and I stayed there for a while.
Okay, so you went to France, but you already had some background in French, or you learned there?
No. I had zero. So a good friend of my grandmother, she used to speak French, so she started teaching me some French before going there. But we didn't have enough time, and finally she had some health problems. She was very old, so I ended up in France without knowing any French. And the first weeks were terrible. I was always dreaming of speaking in public in French, so that was my dream. Somebody was asking me to speak in public in French, and I had nothing, no idea. But there were many people in the same situation as me, and it was a great time. So we started learning French together. We had many classes and different courses of language, and finally I went there in September, and by December I was dreaming in French. So I learned well. Now, this period, which is very good in Europe, is called Erasmus, and it's a project, a large project, maybe the best European project we have. And maybe it's something you should have in Latin America, by the way. I think it could be very good there as well. And it was so good for me that now I'm acting as Erasmus responsible. So now I'm the one who's sending the students abroad. And it changed a lot. Like, for example, now I'm sending students to Paris, and when they come back, they speak English and not French. And that's unbelievable for the France I knew in the 90s.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Quite unexpected. So how old were you when you went to France? Like 8, 9, 20 years, 21?
I was like 24.
Okay.
Yeah, it was already like 24.
So how long did you take to finish your, like, I think you spent 1 year doing electronics, then you moved to
I spent 1 year in Parma, then 2 years in Reggio.
Okay.
When I was 23, actually, I moved to Paris. Spent 1 year there, and then I came back and I finished my studies in Bologna. And I graduated in Bologna in 2000. So I was 26 when I finished my courses.
So
it
7
took
years?
5 years.
No, but overall, including the electronics period.
Yeah, but that was fully taken into my new studies, which were industrial engineering. So I did not lose any exam. Let's say that at that time it was common to finish. The course was 5 years, but usually people took 6 or more. I took 6.
Oh.
And I finished in 2000.
Okay. So you're 2000, though you are about 25 now, 24, 25?
26.
26. Oh, okay, yeah. Coming from France, okay. And you had traveled to you knew Parma, and you traveled to France. You learned some French, which is, I think it helped you later on, right? And and what did you do next? Like, okay, I have a diploma, and then usually we think we did a bunch of courses, and so what is the next step? We usually think about that. So in your case, how was the process?
So when I was finishing my studies, I realized that most of the subjects I studied, I didn't really like them, because we had a lot of mechanics, construction of machines, of industrial plants, something that was not really in my skills. And so I went back to an exam I had in the third year, which was operational research. And I contacted Silvano Martello, who was my professor there. And we started the thesis, and we did this master thesis. And we did it in Fortran, and that was practically the first time I coded. I used to code as a kid because I had a Commodore, and I enjoyed coding in BASIC on the Commodore. But then when I started university, I don't know why, but there were no coding courses. So I lost it. I lost it completely. And I went back to it during the thesis in Fortran. And I liked it. It was a 2D packing problems. And we studied the bar relaxation. If you want to pack a rectangle, that's very difficult because of overlapping. So a relaxation, which is still difficult, but not as difficult as the original problem, is to define divide each rectangle into bars. And then you pack the bars. And usually this has a very good value. And I remember when I was finishing my thesis, I called Mingozzi to ask for instances because I needed instances. And he said, look, what you did is completely useless because there is a new paper by Fekete who just solved all those problems. And in fact, Fekete was unbeatable at that time. Later it has been beaten, by the way. But anyway, I think I learned during the thesis, and I reused the idea many years later. Like 12 years later, I reused the idea, and it worked well.
Yeah, it's something that is quite recurrent here. Like the previous guests I had here, they all at some point, at least. At least I'm sure that Martinelli and Claudio, they share that experience of somebody else did better in some problem that you were studying, and it can be quite frustrating, and it happens to many of us. I've been through that as well. And so it's nice that you shared that, so to show that it's not something really unusual. But I wonder, how did you approach Professor Martello? Like, you just came to his office, and how did you meet him for the first time, and why operations research?
Well, I liked the combinatorial part of operation research, and so I just called Martello. I was in a trip somewhere. I think I was in Germany, and I needed to take a decision on my thesis. I was not so clear. So I remember I went on a public phone. At that time, we still had public phones. And I called Martello and I told him I wanted to do this thesis. And that was fine. And then when I came back from my trip, we started the work. And it was quite long. I finished this first work in Bologna. Then I was not sure what to do. So I had a look at the opportunities, and there was a grant. It was called Enlarge Your Thesis Grant, something like that. And I applied for this grant, and I went to Imperial College in London. And I continued my thesis. So Silvano Martello got in touch with Eleni Agicostantino, who was professor there. And so I went to London, and I did 6 months there. And that was kind of a limbo between my studies at the university, my bachelor, and my PhD. I was not sure to do a PhD yet, so I had 6 months there.
Okay, but like you called Professor Martello, but you met him at some point. Like, did you take courses with him during the undergrad period?
Yes, I had him as professor and Alberto Caprara as assistant.
Okay.
So I got courses. His course was on linear programming, integer linear programming, the basics, and graph theory, again the basics like Dijkstra, Prim, and stuff like that, and the part on discrete event simulation. So it was quite a long course, and I liked it. I liked it.
Okay, so you let me see if I understood. You spent 6 years during undergrad, and then you took these courses, and you became enthusiastic about the topics. And you graduated and you went to Germany at some point, and then you decided, or you went to Germany when you started the masters, and then you only decide later on who is going to be your advisor or what is your research topic?
Well, let's say when I was about to finish my studies, I went to Germany, but just to meet some Erasmus friends. It was a quick. The big trip was later, after the studies on bachelor, when I went to London. In London, it was 6 months. So in Paris, 9 months, and in London, 6 months.
So in London was after the masters or after the masters? Okay, for the 60. And when you joined the masters, like in Bologna, right?
Yeah. So I did not do any master. Let's say at that time that we had something that was 5 years, and that was all. So you do 5 years, and you get what it was called laurea. And after the 5 years, you can start the PhD or you find a job.
Ah, right.
It was only in around 2000 that Europe sit together in Bologna, by the way, and they did the Bologna protocol. And they decided that all courses, with a few exceptions, were going to last 3 years for bachelor and 2 years for master. So what I got is equivalent to master because it's 5 years. But I know it's different in Latin America, for example. In Chile, it's very long. In Brazil also. So let's say you do the 5 years and then you can start a PhD. This is what I did.
Right. And then in between that period, you were in London for 6 months.
Yeah, I did a paper with Eleni, Agi Costantino in London. At that time, any PhD in Italy was starting on the 1st of January. So I graduated on Friday, 17 March 2000, and I started my PhD on January the 1st, 2001.
Okay.
So this period in the middle, I spent it in London. And it was very expensive. And I learned genetic algorithms with Eleni. And that was another very struggling paper because we took a lot of time to have it published. It appeared, I think, in 2005. I think it took 5 years we took 5 years to finish it and then have it published. And it was part of my PhD thesis, by the way. I think it appeared after, if I'm not wrong.
How did you find any grant to go to London?
The grant was provided by the Faculty of Engineering. Like if you finish and you have this period that can take you to the PhD, you have nothing to do, they have these grants. So I applied and it was not such a big grant. It was enough to pay my room. So I had just the accommodation. Then I was going to Imperial College during the day, and then during the evening I was working in a bookshop. It was very nice, like a very nice experience because there were many people. Someone from Manchester, a guy, was sitting next to me. I never understood a word of what he said, like even after 6 months. Also during the weekends I was staying at the bookshop. But we had a lot of tea continuously, a lot of cups of tea, and it was a nice period, this one.
Right. And what about the English? When you arrived in London, were you already fluent, or it was a period that you really improved?
I was not fluent, but I studied it at school. And at Imperial, they gave us classes. I remember a class by a very old professor who was teaching scientific English. That was very nice. And I followed classes, and then maybe but when you work on a computer, you know how it goes. You don't speak much. So inside the school, I was not speaking much, let's say. But at the bookshop, maybe I learned more than what I did inside the school. And I think I learned enough there for this period. Then I lost most of it. Because when I came back, I started visiting countries like Brazil, like Spain. So my English was lost. But that's where I learned it.
But how did you find a job in a bookshop? It was by chance, or you looked for a job?
Well, in London, that is before the Brexit. now London has left Europe for good, and that's a big pain for those that believe in Europe like I do. I mean, I try to send students abroad all the time. I'm sending hundreds of students and receiving others. And I'm very sad that this part of Europe disappeared from the Erasmus agreement. But at that time, it was very easy to find a job. Like I prepared a curriculum vitae. I left home. I entered the first bookshop. I presented the curriculum vitae, and then they said, "Okay, hired." And the next day, they sent me to the office for contracts. I don't know the English name. And in half an hour, I was regularly contracted. And that was super easy.
But that's crazy.
No,
but why a bookshop? You just saw, okay, let me choose the first.
It was very nice. No, it was very nice. It was close to home. It was on the way between my home and Imperial College. I liked it. They were selling books on arts, many things. At that time, they were selling a lot of Harry Potter.
Oh, okay.
It was when Harry Potter came out. It was the fourth Harry Potter, and I remember I was there when we started selling the fourth Harry Potter. It was a massive queue outside the bookshop, and that's the way I learned English. By the way, I read all of them, all the Harry Potter.
Okay. Yeah. My wife is also is crazy about Harry Potter, and she grew up reading those things. Like she read, of course, in Portuguese first, but then she got to read everything in English later on. I suppose it was very nice experience to work like in in London in a bookshop, and probably helped you with English. And of course, you told you lost a little bit later, but I think it's some things just stays there, right? You just have to dig in your subconscious or in your memory that some words or expressions. Maybe you kind of end up understanding also better. Although you had the incident with that interesting experience with the guy from Manchester, I know. But that's very, very nice. And that was when you had your first real research project in London, and it took a while to be published. And so was that your first paper published, or you had any other before?
It was the first paper we tried to publish, but it was not the first paper published. After I came back from London, I started again the PhD. I started the PhD with under the supervision of Martello. I was not very convinced what to do, so I started two things at a time. I did the PhD, and then I got a job in a furniture company.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I was helping the PDG. How do you call the boss of the company? Because he was always meeting with consulting people, and I was preparing data, preparing layouts, doing analysis to help. I was in the middle between these consulting people and the owner of the company. And after 1 year, I realized I was doing everything very bad. Like I was not advancing PhD, just taking the courses, but not real research. And also the company was struggling because, it was 2 full-time jobs. So finally, I realized I had to give up one of the two. Actually, Martello was pretty clear on that. He said, no matter what to do, choose one, because in this way, you're not going to do anything good. And then I stopped working at the company because I didn't feel really, I was very calm. Like when I was going at the company, when I was going home, I was very relaxed. Like I was not taking my job back home, which, it can be very stressful.
Yeah, I know.
And at the PhD, it was different, but still I found it more interesting. So I decided to commit myself entirely to the PhD, and in the next 2 years we published, we submitted 6 papers.
Wow! But all to journals or to conferences and journals?
No, to journals.
Wow! So in 2 years you submitted 6 papers.
Yeah, at the end of the PhD, I had 6 chapters in the PhD thesis. So the last 2 years I worked to recover what I didn't do during the first year. But
that's very impressive. So when you got your first paper published, and how did you feel?
It was in a chapter together with Silvano Martello, and at that time I was collaborating a lot with Michele Monaci. So we had a heuristic. It was not really. So it was a mix between a genetic and a taboo. And it was a seminal work on the strip packing. We introduced like the instances and stuff for that, but we believed something more could be done. But it was okay. I mean, we were accepted in this chapter, and then we could continue with other problems, and eventually moved to packing inside routing problems, which was the end of my PhD.
And then the journal paper, when did it come? When did it come first?
At the time I was working also with Mauro Dell'Amico. So with Silvano Martello and Mauro Dell'Amico, we started working on parallel machine problems. And the first paper was very long, and on a scatter search for algorithm, again meta-heuristic. My thesis was on meta-heuristics, and it was a particular parallel processor scheduling problem with cardinality constraint. And I remember it was very ugly because Journal of Heuristics decided not to shrink the tables with a tiny character, but to keep the original character for the text and for the tables. So I think at the end it was something like more than 30 pages, maybe even 35 pages. But it was very ugly to see. Anyway, I was happy.
Yeah, I think we all feel sometimes it's like we feel happy but relieved. I feel relieved to this day, because the process can be like time consuming, painful, all the the back and forth with reviewers, and I don't know if you feel the same, Lawrence.
Yes, the first relief is when you send a paper to journal, you submit it, but it's fake. Now I realize that it's just a step in the very long and painful process. It will get back to you. So, when it gets back, it can be very boring. Looking back, what I miss is maybe more the use of more systematic approaches. Like the end was always having the paper published, but I lost practically all the codes I did. Like I never kept an eye on keeping the codes well in order, reproducible, and useful for the future. It was clear that the goal was publishing the paper and not keeping the code, and that is something I regret by looking back at what we did.
Was it like Fortran, C++? What did you do?
So I moved during the PhD. I moved to C actually.
Oh.
We call it C++, but it was imperative C. And I never liked it. Never. I like Fortran more, but you could tell there was a big difference. In Fortran, when you had a memory leak, the code was clearly saying, "Look, you have a memory leak. Stop." While in C, you can continue, and so.
So you did all your PhD in coding in C, basically.
Yeah, C++, and using Cplex as a MILP solver. And also for the teaching, we were using Arena for discrete event simulation, and MPOL for helping the students do some models. But research was in C.
Right, and you once told me that when you're doing your PhD, you spent a lot of time in a corridor. So can you give me some more details about that?
Yeah, it was. I spent the entire time in the corridor. We were at the second floor. We were very packed. I did a PhD in operations research and automatic control. I was the only guy in OR. The others were doing automatic. And it was 3 of us in the corridor, and students were passing there all the time. And of course, they were always asking, and when I can find this professor, where is this other professor, and so on. So we put a sign with the three monkeys, like I don't speak, I don't hear, I don't see. But it was useless. They kept asking us again and again where to go and what to do, and that was a bit painful. I remember also at a certain time I used to play chess just to relax a bit. And I remember the big boss from the department coming and looking at me playing chess. And I was in the corridor, so he could look at me. But then I realized that he told me, it's very nice, because he was a chess player. He liked it. So
Yeah, I also like to
didn't
play
discuss.
chess. Yeah.
No.
Mm.
I had a lucky desk anyway, and that was very good. This desk is still there, I think, and many people did their PhD in that desk. So it was the lucky one. Starting from Matteo Fischetti, then Juan José Salazar González, and then Andrea Lodi and Alberto Caprara. They all did their PhD there. So it was the lucky one. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Not that.
Do you have any photos that I would like to see that at some point later? If you have any.
No, I don't think I have any photos. But it's not very beautiful. But anyway.
So like you have a desk that was in a corridor, like.
Yeah, the corridor was inside the space for professors. Let's say professors had their offices, and the corridor had a kind of. At a certain point, it was getting larger, and then there was enough space on one side to fit some PhD students. We were many, so we were there. But apart from the students, the standard students coming and going, it was okay. We were quite. I wouldn't say in a private situation, but we were having some fun together. Yeah.
Yeah. So you told me you like you had that paper on the parallel machine scheduling, and then on the strip packing, and what else? You were mentioning something about packing and routing, and what I mean. Tell me what were like the 6 papers you had during that time.
Well, apart the 2 works on cutting and packing, then I had 2 on parallel machine scheduling, and then at a certain point I wanted to move. I wanted to have another journey, and then I spoke with some professors, and there was Daniele Vigo there, and he told me, look, I have a nice research. I'm looking for someone that could do this research with me and Juan José Salazar González. And it was on a combined routing and packing. And he said you could go to Tenerife to do this research, and of course that was a wonderful idea. So I don't remember when I did, but during my PhD, so I spoke with Daniele Vigo, and he proposed me this project, this research project on Tenerife, and of course I liked the idea. And at that time, Juan José was in Bologna, so Juan José Salazar González, so I could define the details of the project with him. And I applied for a grant, and I got it. It was called Marco Polo Grant, and so I could spend a few months in Tenerife, a semester, and that was beautiful. It was a very, very nice period. I was living in a flat with people from Spain and Germany mostly. And I was going to the faculty of mathematics where Juan José is teaching. I was working during the day, and then we had fun traveling around the island. The island is very nice. And I learned Spanish, by the way. That was also another language I liked a lot.
Yeah, so you landed in Tenerife without knowing Spanish whatsoever, or you already had studied a little bit before?
No, I knew nothing, but it's okay for an Italian to learn Spanish. You know the
Sure.
feeling. So I had classes both at the university and in a private school. I remember it was packed of German students. The private school was packed with Germans. It was because that was a very popular destination for German students to do their Erasmus or their period there. And there were many PhDs and students in physics because they have an observatory there on the mountain Teide, which is the highest of Spain. They have very low light problems. They don't have traffic lights, or they don't have lights from how do you call that? Light pollution. You could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can observe the stars very well. So there were a lot of students there, and there we did a nice work because I knew enough about packing at that time. I could do a branch and bound and stuff for packing, but I knew nothing about mathematical modeling and for routing. And one of them taught me how to do branch and cut, how to separate constraints, how to do max flow stuff, and he was very nice. He took a lot of time with me, and we collaborated again in the next years. And so at the end, we had this combination of branch and cut and branch and bound, and that was it was eventually accepted on transportation science. And that was I
Wow.
was very happy
Wow. Wow.
about that.
So was it your first paper involving exact algorithms?
On the parallel machine, we did some exact algorithms, but they were just a way to prove a limit.
Mm.
You see, when you want to do meta heuristics, you want to know how far can the exact go, and so that you can do your heuristics. That was just let's try to close instances to optimality.
Yeah. So at that time you already knew like English, Italian, of course, English, French, Spanish. You once told me you studied Germany for quite a while. So when was that?
Yeah, I started getting. I liked German as a language, so I started studying it both in Italy, and then I did some periods in Germany in classes. But eventually I gave up. I really liked it, but if you research and then there is a moment in which I mean you do not need so many languages. Like you can live well with a few of them. It's a pity. It's a pity. Like also Portuguese. When I tried to learn it at a certain point, it was just too much. I liked it, and I still like it, and I still can understand, and I'm a member of juries in Portuguese, and then that's okay, as long as it's OR. But I didn't have really the willingness to do it until the end. So to become proficient in the language. So it was enough.
Yeah, I can understand that. So did you travel elsewhere during your PhD?
Yes, when I came back, I didn't want to stay again in Bologna, so I applied for another grant. That was called More Overseas Grant. And since I was doing this cutting and packing in an exact way, I said, okay, let's do it in a heuristic way. And then I went to Montreal. And there it was a joint work again with Professor Martello, who was not part of the previous work, and with Michel Gendreau and Gilbert Laporte.
Wow.
That again was a great period. I could use both French and English because in Montreal that's perfect. And they gave me their code Taburoot, and they asked me to insert packing inside Taburoot. And I remember I took a couple of months to try to do that, and I failed. So at a certain point, I said, okay, let's recode this thing with my structure, and then it worked. And I think I learned a lot there because I was not an experienced programmer, and then I learned new structures like double linked lists and the way to do local search on VRPs in an effective way because I never did it. So that was important. And also that led to a paper. Finally, it was accepted on networks. It was a special issue related to a conference. And that was my last trip for the PhD.
Yeah, I mean, at that period, at that point, you worked with many important researchers in our field. So that's really, I think it was a privilege to have all that opportunity back then, like spending some time abroad in different countries. I think that probably helped you in your on your next stages of your career, probably, right? You got that very impressive curriculum with many publications. You mentioned now that one of that networks paper was related to some conference. Do you remember the first time you presented a paper in a conference or an abstract or something?
Yes, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was in London, and it was a conference where I presented the cutting and packing paper, one of the first two papers I did in my thesis. And I remember meeting there Claudia Archetti. She was the first person I met in a conference, by the way. But already there, she was more self-confident, I think. I did a terrible talk, and at the end of the talk, this guy from somewhere in UK, he asked me a question I didn't understand, and it took me a while. So at the end, he was asking where the instances come from. It was something like that, but it was difficult to answer. And I remember they misspelled my name. It was not Iori, it was Ion, I-O-N. So the guy, when he called me to get on stage, he was looking for a Chinese. So he was not looking at me. So I said, it's you. And that was my first conference. It was a workshop in London.
Okay, so but was that like an international conference or some like very very few participants? Were that many people there?
It was quite small, around don't remember, but less than 50 people.
Okay. Okay. So it was like a nice first experience, and the next one. Do you remember any incident in some conference at that time, meeting people for the first time?
Well, concerning conferences, I had a number. I'm not very a fan of going to conferences, but I remember meeting you in a very nice wood conference. It was in Spain, right?
Yeah, CIRRELT, 2011.
That was very
But
nice.
that's already after you finish your PhD. But I'm saying during the PhD, when you were like still trying to establish yourself, how was the process of getting the confidence to present and, you know?
Well, it was not easy. I remember even I had problems like even in just when they call a person by his name and then it's your turn and you have to present. For me, that was a disaster because you have anxiety going on and on and on. So when it's your turn, you have already exhausted your energy. And I remember that was difficult. For example, in Ossois, they have a big workshop on mathematical programming with the Gotha and that was tough. Just to say what was my name and what did I study. Then I remember another tough conference, but that was okay at the end, and it was the final conference where I presented my PhD thesis. I was competing for a prize, which I lost, by the way. It was three PhD theses extracted from the entire Europe. It was me, and then a guy from Belgium, and a girl from Poland. And eventually, the girl won the prize. She deserved it. And I remember preparing this talk for a lot of time. You know, like you do it again and again and again and again and again. And but anyway, the conference was nice. They paid my trip, and I was in Reykjavik. I shared my room with André Gustavo dos Santos, a Brazilian researcher that was working with Alberto Caprar at the time.
Wait, you went to Iceland?
Yes, with André. And it was a very nice conference. When we arrived, it was very late. And we asked the hotel, the guy, look, there is still sun. When it's going to be dark? And he looked at us and he said, in September. And that was end of July, something like that. So we had more than 7 days there. And it was wonderful because the conference lasted the entire period, but they were nice. I had this talk in the first days, and then they were leaving some hours for sightseeing. They were organizing buses, and we saw quite a lot of Iceland, and wonderful. That was wonderful there.
Yeah, so I mean, I noticed you like traveling a lot, but not necessarily taking part of the conferences. It can be quite
Yeah.
stressful to you, and but I mean, over the years, you kind of got used to it. I saw you presenting several
Yeah.
times, and you did great. So you can hide it
Yeah.
pretty well.
No, yes, finally you get used to it. I mean, I'll never be a professional on that. Like I'm happier when I'm in a laboratory. But I can do it as I think it's part of our job. So we need to do it,
Yeah, I
and
understand.
yeah.
Yeah, I can relate entirely. So I'm more like a lab guy too. But so you got like you were mentioning that you're running for a prize, right? Trying to win a prize. Like you were selected among the top 3. Was it that?
Yeah, it was called the European Doctoral Dissertation Award,
Mm-hmm.
and they select a thesis from each country of Europe. I was selected to represent Italy, and then they select 3 among all the theses, and then these 3 have to speak in front of a commission. Then one wins, and I got to these 3, and I think a few years after another student from Bologna, Claudia D'Ambrosio, she did the same competition, and finally she won. I think Claudia got the Euro Doctoral Dissertation Award, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but already being like selected as as a top 3 of the entire continent is quite enough achievement. I assume you became happy, but you freaked in a way, right? Because
Yeah, it was bad getting so close,
hmm
but it was okay. I mean,
yeah, it happens. Yeah. Right. So I assume that by the time you got your diploma, you earn your PhD. So now what did you do?
so I went back, and life for a postdoc in Italy is not easy. Usually, most of the people have to fly away, like to look for a position abroad. And I found a grant. It was called postdoc grant, and it was a 2 years grant, a 2 year grant. And so I could continue my study in Bologna. I was still with Silvano Martello, and since I had this collaboration, I moved during these 2 years back and forth to Montreal. I did other works with Michel Gendreau, Gilbert Laporte, and then I met Jean-François Cordeau, and we started a collaboration that is still going on. We had many works together, and that was a good period. I was not very. A postdoc is always tricky because you want to get a permanent position, but at the same time you can enjoy your freedom, like you still have some opportunities here and there. Finally, the opportunity for me was to go back to Reggio Emilia. So there was no place in Bologna. At that time, I met my fiancée, Ornella, and I was living with her in Bologna. So my first option would have been to remain there, but there were no places, and Bologna sent many people away during the years. So going back to Reggio Emilia was a good opportunity because there was a permanent position, and from Bologna to Reggio Emilia is just 60 kilometers, and that is a highway, so you can travel in 40 minutes. You can be there. And so I started in Reggio Emilia as an assistant professor in, I think it was 2006. So in 2004 I finished my PhD, and then I worked a little bit more again on a parallel machine, routing and loading. And then in 2006 I started working in Reggio Emilia. And at that time I was commuting from Bologna. So I was living in Bologna and I was going to Reggio just to teach and do research.
Mm. And then you got 2006. You said you got your permanent position, and you had to start. Like, I mean, you were already teaching before during that period, right? 2004 and 2006, and
Yeah, I was teaching in Bologna already in the PhD. I was doing some classes for Martello, Teaching in Bologna was tougher than teaching in Reggio Emilia, because in Bologna I had a class with 250 people, and that was a lot, like 2 floors. It was very, very big. My first lecture was on a primal dual method, a pain, really a pain, but I prepared it all night long. And the second one was on discrete event simulation. Easier, but really something I don't really like. But then teaching in Reggio was easier. I had 50 guys. So it was, I could take them to the laboratory. I could speak with them. I knew their names. And I think at that time, now I have 180. So Reggio increased a lot during the years. But at that time, teaching was not like a burden, because it was a small class and we could do nice things together. I like it.
When did you realize you wanted to follow academic career?
I was not sure. I was really, during the first years, I liked the job of university professor, and I thought I liked it and I wanted to do it, but I was also very tempted to go to industry. So my idea was to be an academic professor, but then also to be a consultant. I wanted to do something in real life. And now I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to approach companies and try to apply OR to some real world activities. Also because after a while, in which you know the feeling, like you start studying something and then after a while, if you don't touch the ground, then you can feel a little bit lost.
If we spend a lot of time doing research using the benchmark instances, and then we compare and then we compete with other colleagues and all that, but sometimes you feel that there's something missing, right? So I'm doing a lot of algorithms, models, and stuff like that, and how do you put that in practice? And I understand your feeling. So sometimes it's just a necessity, if you like, right? To go on and try to follow and try to experiment different paths. And so when did you become responsible for the Erasmus program there in UNIMORE, at UNIMORE?
I don't remember exactly, about 2012 maybe. I think it's 8 years or more that I'm Erasmus responsible. So I'm sending students all over Europe, and then I started the More Overseas program, which was not available at the moment. And so I'm sending students to Brazil. I sent many students to Viçosa and João Pessoa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to send them also to Rio, but then because of COVID, we stopped, as you know. I'm sending students also to Japan and to Chile in Concepcion, and but mostly in Europe. And I like it.
I know
you're close.
I know you have a very good Japanese friend, right?
Yes, Mutsunori Yagiura is a very talented professor. Like, he's very good in combinatorial optimization. He has been visiting Reggio Emilia once or twice a year during the last. I think he came 8 times.
Wow.
He stopped because of COVID, of course. But and last year in 2019, I was supposed to go to Japan. It was my first time that I could give him a visit, like after all the visits that he paid. But we couldn't go finally. But I'm still trying to send students there. I hope I'll go. It's in my plan.
Right. So so then I think we are approaching more or less 2013, and I'm not sure whether it was in 2012 or I think that I approached you. I sent you an email asking you if you wanted to take part of this very big project, 3-year project. At that time, you had that Science Without Borders program that they had. They provide some funding and grants for international researchers, and if you wanted to be, like we call it, a special international researcher. And I never asked you that. So how did you kind of react receiving that email out of nowhere? I remember I asked Maria Batarra if I should do that. She encouraged me quite a lot. Because I mean I met you there, and I think I spoke with you once when you were visiting her, or something like that. I'm not sure. In when
I remember the conference in Spain, and then I remember you inviting me to João Pessoa. Of course, I was very happy. And I don't remember. I had family there, but I don't remember how many daughters. I think I had 2 daughters.
2, yeah.
Carlotta and Martina.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great to move there with family because I could go to the laboratory, and at the same time they could enjoy the beach, and that's what we did finally. And I had a very good time there, and it lasted 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, for a few months every year, 1 or 2 months per year.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the second year, I did just 1 month because we had our third daughter, Isabella. But then on the last year, I took Isabella to João Pessoa, and it was not easy, the trip. Like if you have a small kid and you need to take overseas flight, and that can be demanding. I still remember it. But then the beach and everything, we had a good time there.
Yeah, we spent I think at least 1 or 2 New Year's, New Eve together or something like that, with Ornella and the kids. It was very nice. I mean, we were very happy to have you here. You helped us quite a lot. No, with you sent also students like Bruno, Max, and Stefano, of course. And we end up publishing with all of them, and it's like also with that funding of that project, we could also afford other interesting resources, and so it was a very nice period for us. Thanks to your kindness and involvement in all our research back then. Also, my first transportation science paper was with you, right? So it was a very, very nice period, and you came about, I don't know, half a dozen times here, and it was great. And I think you also, apart from doing all this very nice research work, I think recently you got involved in some astronomy group there in Reggio. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it was a kind of joke. I have a friend who's very fan of astronomy, so he's all the time, all the free time he has telescopes and he's looking at the stars and stuff. And so he told me we should create this group, we should do these things. And then we had, now in Italy you are evaluated for your research, for your teaching, and also for what they call public engagement. So are you able to bring in our field science to the community? So I thought that was a good public engagement activity, and so I put together a few people. Another arrived freely, and we built a group, a little group. It was like less than 20 people at the beginning, but a few of them were very, very motivated, and we started doing meetings, and then when COVID arrived, webinars. And we started working with a talented researcher, Orosei, who is from Reggio Emilia, and he's the guy who discovered the underground lakes of water on Mars. And now we are doing research with him. I have all the data of this satellite that is traveling around Mars, and now we are solving a set covering problem. We want to decide when is the moment to take the pictures, because it's crazy. Like this satellite costs a lot of money, like billions, and of course it's if you need to cover areas and you're passing hundreds or thousands of times over these areas, you need to decide exactly when to take a picture or not. And so far they did it by hand. They have an operations manager, and like always, like in companies, they do it by hand. And now we got the data finally, and now we are working to develop a mathematical model, which is not going to work, and then a heuristic to define the sequence. And we are planning when to take the pictures from in the next period, where when the satellite is going on the north pole of Mars, and this is going to happen in 2025, if I could be mistaken. So we are planning in advance what we will have to do in the future.
That's very, very impressive. Very nice to hear about that work. Like what started as a hobby, it turned out to be research then. And you're pushing all the way to Mars.
Yeah, Roberto or Jose, like he published many times on Nature, on Science. He has multiple papers on Nature and Science. It's this level. It's so high.
No.
But so after organizing webinars and conferences on the public engagement, I said, look, I want to show you a bit OR. And he was surprised. He was very surprised because they have an OR manager. But so they know OR is important. They don't call it operations research. They call it operations, like in companies. If you go to a company, you will not find operations research. You will find operations. And what they need usually is some easy rules to manage the problem. And that is what they were doing there also. An easy rule to manage a complex problem, which is understandable. So what you can do is, what we as a community should do is just to push a little bit and say you can manage the problem with a simple rule, but then maybe with a little bit more elaborated algorithm, then you can optimize, you can gain something. And this is what I'm trying to do now.
Who knows, you can get published on like Science and Nature yourself.
No. We are eating on some standard operation research journal. That's our...
Come on, who knows, right?
Well, who knows, but
yeah. That's brilliant, Manuel. I'm very happy for you in that sense. Like, you know that OR has many applications. It's literally everywhere. But like when you're able to blend, if you like, topics that are like your own work and then your hobby, I think that's the ultimate thing you can achieve, and because you're just basically trying to combine both ends. And I had that experience doing the guitar solo paper and all that research was it was really nice for me. I'm very much into music, so I can imagine the feeling, and this thing is really important in your case it's a super relevant practical application, and I'm really looking forward to see how that develop. Right now you're like still in Reggio. You're supervising PhD work, like PhD students, master students. We've collaborated a lot during that period. During the last years. I sent you a couple of students, Rafael Kramer, for example. Sometimes I think it's not an easy task to find good students. I think you can take this opportunity to tell what type of PhD candidates you're interested and what type of background they should have, and what opportunities can you offer, like grants and so on.
So I had so far as a supervisor or co-supervisor 16 PhD students. So
wow.
It's a good amount, and I had mathematicians, industrial engineers, and computer scientists. So they are all very welcome, of course. The important thing is when you start, you need already to think at what will happen after the PhD. So supposing the PhD is going to be good, what will happen after? And at the beginning, I had people from abroad, like Jose and Manuel Alba. They were coming from Cuba, and eventually they went to USA. Now they're working as engineers. For them, already living Cuba, which they love, was already a good step forward because they could get some more money, and use their studies, which were very high, like they knew how to code perfectly in Cuba, use their studies to advance in life. And now they are in Miami, if I'm not mistaken. Then I had other people from abroad, like Max Sanz, and I told him, I'm not going to be able to give you a position in Italy. And he said, I don't care. I want to travel. And that's what he did. Like after Italy, he moved to Edinburgh, where he studied for 3 years. And now finally he's assistant professor. He started in September and he's in the Netherlands. So he had a good position.
Yeah, I was very happy for him.
Yeah. And I had a bunch of Brazilian students, thanks to you and to André. And I think they are all those who finished found a position. And again, I'm very happy. So I already have a few people that found a way out. Now I have a few Italians, and this is going to be more demanding because Italy in this moment is producing PhDs, but just 1 out of 10 is able, on average, is able to continue his academic career in Italy. So that's a very high competition. It's too high. It's nonsense. The problem is lack of economical support for young professors. And let's see what happens. I still have 2 years because now I have students that still have to go for 2 years, and I'm committed to find opportunities for them. That's a point. So when I meet a student, I'd like to ask him what he wants to do after. That's an important thing to ask.
Right, and I noticed that like you were a super good advisor. Like I have Bruno here working with us, and he always tells that he was very lucky. Like Rafa also tells that they're all very lucky to have you as an advisor. I learned a lot from you, in fact, even though I felt I did a small postdoc. You came here so many times, and like in total at least more than 6 months, I think. And so I every time you came, I could learn from you, and like you like to sit down next to the guy and start explaining in detail, going through that and all. I mean, through the process. You're very talented in developing models and very nice and good ideas, exact algorithms as well. So for those interested in working with Manuel, I mean, it will be a wonderful opportunity if you're able to do that. And I mean, he's the quiet guy, stays there, but he's a machine. He publishes regularly, quite a lot, with many international researchers, and at this stage now he's a well-established guy and one of the tops of our field, and I'm very proud to be his friend and collaborator. So Manuel, I'm very, very thankful. Grazie mille for taking the time to share a lot of memories of yours, and I'm looking forward to meeting you soon. And I hope I feel guilty that I owe you a visit. I know that. I'm really sorry about that. We're supposed to meet last year in Bath, I think, but sadly the conference got canceled and we could not see each other. But anyway, I wish you like all the best. Please say hi to Ornella, Carlotta, Martina, and Isabella.
They all entered, yeah.
Yeah, and I hope you had some fun. And
Anand,
thank you very much.
Yeah, Anand, thank you very much. You are too kind with me. So thank you for an invitation, first of all, and congratulations for yet another very nice idea you have. I hope this series will continue. I will help you proposing new researchers that you can interview for and I hope this can be a long project for you, something that can continue again and again.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I need the help from the colleagues and friends to keep this moving forward. and I'm looking. Actually, I mean, I'm hopeful. Hopefully, I think what you just said can become true, and we're able to help young students and those that are pursuing an academic career in OR and related subjects to learn from the experiences of these great guys that are willing to participate as a guest here. So Manuel, once again, thank you very much, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Anand. Let's
Bye.
keep it touch.
Bye.
Bye bye.